Welcome, everybody, to Inside the Birds TV with Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan, presented by DraftKings. And it feels like forever since the Eagles have played a game, but they got a big NFC East matchup Sunday in North Jersey against the Giants. It'll be the second time in 3 games they're playing Big Blue. And to help us break down the game, we bring in good friend Dan Graziano of ESPN. Dan, I think this is your first time in Inside the Birds, so we thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. How you guys doing?
We're good. It's like I said, it feels like it's been a while since the Eagles played a game here, and we're excited to actually break down a game. We had your colleague on, Jordan Ron, from NFL Nation, ESPN.com, to preview the first time they played.
Between rounds of golf, huh?
Yeah, we pulled him off the course.
And
it's kind of funny because at that point there was very little positives that we could talk about for either team going into that game, but now here we are just a couple of weeks later. Eagles have 2 straight wins, and the Giants are looking better. They're certainly looking more improved, right? So it feels like we have something decent that we can talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, the Giants, they play hard. I mean, I don't think they're a fun team or an easy team to play. They're not very good. I mean, they don't score a ton, but yeah, I think they're the first-year coach, Joe Judge, has got them. You know, I think they're in the right place in terms of where they are in their attempted rebuild. At least they have the right kind of culture going on there.
Dan, when you look at Joe Judge, it's an interesting guy because right before he got the job, when the rumors were circulating that he might be a head coaching candidate for the Giants, I mean, I must have talked to 10 coaches. Very few people knew him. What do you know about him? Because it was hard to get a lot of information about this guy.
Well, it's Belichick and Saban, right? So those are his two. So they're pretty buttoned up, organizations there. So I don't think you were supposed to know a lot about Joe Judge. He was kind of Bill's secret. So look, I got a chance to talk to Joe at the combine. We had one of those long nights with Jordan actually, and that was the first time I met him. I told him recently. I think he's the last new person I met, like in the world. Like, because right after that I flew home, and then you couldn't go anywhere for 6 months. So, no, he's very he's serious about his purpose, right? Like he's 100% sure he can do this, and he has an idea what he wants to do in terms of like I said, that culture element you hear a lot about. So he's smart, and I think he probably delegates well, right? Like he knows Patrick Graham. Obviously, they know each other from all the New England connections, and then Jason Garrett, I think, was probably recommended by ownership who knew him. But I think he does a good job of kind of being that, what they call the walk-around coach, right? He's not calling any plays.
Like Coughlin, right?
Or John Harbaugh, who was a special teams coach that became a head coach. And obviously we're doing comparison to 2 long-timers and Super Bowl champions, so it's possible he's more like someone else that we can't think of because they were unremarkable. But he strikes me as somebody who's got a shot here. And I think, the off-season provided a lot of people in the league a chance to show something. And when you're talking about a time when you couldn't get together other than Zoom calls, and when there were, protests in the streets, and players and professional sports leagues were debating whether it was the right idea to go to work, and then having these conversations in these locker rooms. Players and actually ownership of the Giants have told me that the way Joe Judge handled all that really resonated throughout the organization. So he's had an opportunity to sort of, establish himself as a strong leader and the right kind of leader. And so far, it does seem to be working.
And does it seem like both teams needed a crawl before they walked this year? I mean, certainly the Eagles got off to a terrible start. And their last 2 games, they've won ugly, but they've won. You look at the Giants, if Engram catches that ball against the Eagles, maybe they win that game. The following week, they play Tampa really tough, and obviously it comes down to a 2-point conversion. They don't convert, but then they go and beat Washington. Like, do you feel like these teams are kind of working their way up from a really bad start? Or are these just bad teams that are about to play each other?
Well, I think it's a couple different situations, right? You have a Giants team where a lot of things are new. And this is not the year for a lot of things to be new because you didn't really have an off-season program or a real training camp and all that kind of stuff. So that's new head coach and a lot as a roster it needs work. The Eagles don't have the newness, but they have all the injuries. And something weird's going on with the quarterback. And so there's been a couple of things that, you guys are closer to it, but looking at it from the outside, there's been a couple of things that just sort of haven't clicked. And fortunately for them, they're still in a position where they're in the driver's seat in the division now that they're starting to get healthier. And I think you'd rather be the Eagles right now because you can probably look at it and say you've played your worst. You've, knock on wood, had the worst of your injury luck most likely. And maybe the second half is when you get to show who you are. Because I think going into the season, if we had looked at the two rosters, we would have said the Eagles are going to be a better team than the Giants. It'd probably be an Eagles-Cowboys race for the NFC East, whereas those other two are just kind of in a different place in their sort of franchise construction. So I think it's a couple different situations. But, I mean, yeah, to some extent, the early part of the season has been a struggle for both for different reasons. Giants' biggest problem right now is Washington's not on their schedule anymore. Is that right? That's the only team that's the only team they've been able to beat. Daniel Jones is Peyton Manning when he's up against Washington, and then he's Jameis Winston when he's up against everybody else.
Dan, speaking of Daniel Jones, that's where I wanted to go to next.
He showed some help.
Yep, thank you. He showed some promise last year, but the turnover bug, which is really right now with Carson Wentz is on pace for 32, which is almost hard to understand. But Daniel Jones, at least he played a clean game this last one. Where are you at with him? He's only in his second year, but what's the team feel like about him, and where are you at with him from what you know and you've heard?
Talking to the coaching staff, they really do like him. I mean, he's the kind of player coaches like, right? I mean, he's a good, he takes coaching well. He's a hard worker. He wants to be great. But they're figuring it out. I mean, they like that he's aggressive down the field. That he has this kind of Eli Manning thing where he kind of thinks he can make any throw, right? And the fact that he didn't make it, 1 quarter ago doesn't deter him from trying it again. So that leads to turnovers. Obviously, you mentioned Wentz, I think has the most turnovers of anyone in the league, but Daniel Jones not far behind him. I think it's 16 to 12 or something like that. So huge numbers. And obviously he had the same problem last year, and it's got to get corrected. And he knows it, and the coaching staff knows it. But you do see flashes. I mean, the offense hasn't scored much. It hasn't clicked. Saquon Barkley being out you really can't replace a guy like that. So obviously they've had to change a lot of what they want to do because of his absence. They didn't have Sterling Shepard for a time. So, the left tackle, Nate Solder, opted out, a lot of stuff. So I think they're patient and hopeful on Daniel Jones, but recognizing that, if the turnover thing doesn't get fixed, then yeah, you do. You have a Jameis Winston situation on your hands.
So Dan, obviously one of their bigger free agent acquisitions too were probably Blake Martinez and James Bradbury, and it seems like they've paid off. I feel like the Giants defense, as the season has gone along, has been formidable at times. And is that fair to say?
Yeah, look, they obviously play very hard, and I don't think they're easy to score on. I think, earlier in the season when they were playing the 49ers, I was talking to Trent Williams, their left tackle, who'd been in Washington and knows the Giants well from playing them twice a year. And he said, on tape, this does not look like the same Giants defense I'm used to seeing. And that was meant as a compliment because Giants defense has been pretty bad for a while. And, Trent wasn't going to come out and say that. But the point was, they've made some improvements. Blake Martinez, great reviews there in terms of just sort of being an engine in the middle of all of it. And Bradbury on the back end has been excellent. And, they've cobbled together a little bit of an edge rush. Obviously, that's a weak spot. And then they trade Marcus Golden. But, those guys aren't easy to find. So they'll continue to prioritize that going forward, I'm sure, in the offseason. But, yeah, I think that's the example where I say, that's a team that is – I think they're playing as well as they can, right? Which is not to say that's not a bad thing. There are teams that don't play up to their potential. I think the Giants do play up to their potential, given what they have on their roster. It's just that potential is not contender level. So, and that's just because, again, the roster needs work. I mean, they haven't had a lot of successes with the early rounds of the draft. We mentioned Daniel Jones is still a work in progress, but, a couple hits here and there, but they're also, for every one of those, there's the cornerback that they traded up to draft in the first round that, we all know what happened with him. So, yeah, I think the defense has shown a lot and has reason to be optimistic. It's one of these years, guys, where the new coach is like, I got to figure out who I have, who's going to be a part of this thing as we move forward. And I think there are some players on that side of the ball, especially, that are showing that they have a chance to be that.
Well, Dale, one guy who could be part of it, and he's finally staying healthy, knock on wood, is number 88, Evan Engram, who really should have beaten the Eagles two games ago. He drops a pass, not the easiest pass to catch, but he should have had it. That probably would have ended the game for them. Is he a guy you could see? I didn't think he'd be coming back after the season, but because he's playing so well, is there a chance you think they bring him back for the future?
Yeah, they do like him. I mean, they got calls on him at the deadline. There's no question about it. He's a dynamic guy that a lot of teams felt it could help them, and they weren't interested in trading him. It's a team that could use some picks, quite honestly. So that tells me he may be in their plans. Now, what's he going to want, right? Like that's a big. And who else is going to be interested, and what effect does that have on the price? So, and who's the GM going to be, right? We don't know if Dave Gettleman will be back. I mean, obviously, It hasn't had a lot of success. So. But the fact that they did not trade him, even though they were getting inquiries and that they were kind of telling teams, no, thanks, we're not interested, tells you he may be in their plans. And look, they need somebody that can make some plays. Sterling Shepard, good player, but I mean, he's not going to break the game open for you. Darius Slayton, he can, but he's not going to consistently be that downfield threat. And Evan Engram, they drafted him because they thought he could be, and it's 2-3 coaching staffs ago, but they thought he could be that threat down the middle of the field. And you mentioned he's had the health questions, and this year he's been able to stay healthy. He just hasn't been as productive as they hoped he would be if he stayed healthy. But you're right, it's coming along in recent weeks, and they are happy with him. So, yeah, I could see him coming back next year. It just depends, again, who's making the decisions.
All right, I want to tell our listeners to download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app right now and use promo code ITB to get a special offer when you sign up. That's promo code ITB for a special offer when you sign up at DraftKings Sportsbook. Real curious, did you happen to catch the Doug Pederson press conference this week where he was asked about Brett Favre's comments that the Eagles should have gone ahead with Nick Foles over Wentz? Did you catch that?
I've seen the clips, the pertinent clips, yes. Okay,
what are your as someone who's not in the Philly market, just observing from afar, your thoughts on that?
I think I'm not always as interested in former players' opinions just because they're former players, right? Like that. Like to me, it's easily ignored. And my sense was that Doug would rather have just ignored it, right? But obviously he's going to get asked about it, and obviously he knows Brett, and there's that relationship there. So he seemed like a guy that was trying to balance. I'm friends with Brett. I don't want to insult him versus I don't want to throw my quarterback under the bus, but. I mean, it was. I think you probably would have rather seen him been more definitively supportive of Carson than protective of his friendship with Brett. I think if you're talking about, but I mean, yeah, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe Carson doesn't care, right? Maybe it just sounds bad on the outside, and the two of them talked about it, and Carson said, "Forget about it, don't worry." So yeah, but it was a weird moment. It was almost like he was caught off guard. I mean, I can't imagine he was, but yeah. I think that it's what it felt like.
Dan, one other thing I do want to bring up, and we talked about Joe Judge being the head coach, which to me is somewhat of a departure because I thought for sure that they would go after an offensive head coach because of Daniel Jones. Why do you think they went with the CEO head coach, Joe Judge, like Coughlin, instead of getting that maybe young guy or maybe a Josh McDaniels type who could lead the team and the quarterback?
Because they interviewed Matt Rule, right, and they were connected to him and we didn't realize Carolina was going to go as all in on that as they did. And they talked to Eric Bieniemy, and obviously Eric Bieniemy is a guy that gets a lot of attention in the coaching cycle. So yeah, they were looking that way. But I mean, talking to the people in that organization that interviewed Joe Judge about the hire, they said, look, it was you do these interviews and you come out of them with an impression, and the impression they came out of that interview with was, wow, this guy is the guy. And so. I think that's. I mean, is that the whole thing? Did he work for Bill Belichick? Did he work for Nick Saban? Is he getting the right kind of recommendations? Does he have the right kind of resume? Yes. But that was what did it for them. They came out of the interview thinking that he had just blown them away, and that settled it. Especially, I mean, if they had the choice between him and Matt Rule, do they go that way? I don't know. Carolina already took him, but. No, they were very, very impressed with Joe Judge, and the impression he made on them seems to be the one he's making on the team so far.
All right, Dan, let me wrap it up with this. Because you're so plugged in not only to the league, but the players union and the conversations that happen. There's obviously been some new rules this year because of COVID, and I think some of the teams like some of the new rules and don't like some others. The IR rule, for example, where you only have to miss 3 games, might be something that people like. So what do you see going forward? Well, first of all, tell me how you think the NFL feels right now about how this season has gone. And then anything going forward, you think that'll change because of it?
Yeah, I think they feel good about how it's gone, but there's no one's going to be doing any victory dances until February 9th, right? Like there's no way for anyone to know that they can complete this season until they do. That's it. And they know that. It's going to be white knuckle to the finish. It's going to be having to rearrange and reschedule. I don't think they're kidding themselves about the difficulties of that over the next couple of months, because bye weeks are disappearing and the weather's getting colder and cases are spiking all over the country. So they know that there are going to have to be some arrangements made. And I think, to the second part of your question, I think they'll continue to change the rules because they have continued to amend them based on what they've learned about how the rules they implemented work and how the whole thing is behaving. So the issue with the rescheduling will get hairy. There's no question about it. If they have to reschedule games at this point, they have talked about adding a week 18 on the end and putting some games there. And then the thing they passed this week, which was if they can't get all this done in 17 or 18 weeks, and there are games that would matter for playoff seeding or playoff qualification, they would expand the playoffs and put 8 teams per conference in. So that's new. And that's an example of, hey, we're going to have to adjust on the fly here because we really don't know what's going to happen. So far, so good. I mean, there haven't been major team-wide outbreaks other than in Tennessee, and Tennessee seemed to have gotten through that without too much disruption and, onward. But, I mean, there are going to continue to be cases, and they're going to continue to rely on the procedures they've put in place in terms of their testing and their contact tracing and their isolation of guys who test positive, et cetera, et cetera. And they feel like it's working, but they're constantly having discussions about what needs to be done to react to the situation as it evolves. And those are just going to continue. It's the most exhausting season to cover. I'm sure it's the most exhausting season to administer. If you're a coach or a GM or a league executive, I'm sure the players are over it and would rather just have their regular lives back like all the rest of us. But it is big picture. It's working. All the games that were supposed to have been played by now have been played.
That is true. It is working. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time. That's Dan Graziano. You can see him on ESPN. You can read him on ESPN.com. And hopefully Dan will come back with us sometime down the road to talk more about the NFL season. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, guys. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.